All of our files are free and will remain free. If you like the show, you can show support by donating $1 to help with expenses. Just use the PayPal link on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Thanks.
And welcome back to the second part of our little digital karma debate here today. We have with us the master of these weird things, Clif. Yeah, we've been browsing a few subjects. I want to kind of move a little back to a couple. When you talk about the Jesus mode, quote unquote, where you can monitor two places at the same time, right?
Right. Right.
I had a guest on. His name is Tony Gosling, and he told me that the Intel agencies have a backdoor in the computer, I think inside the CPU. And I'm not surprised, because my machine is very honest, because on outside I have a bumper sticker saying Intel inside.
Well, hey, you know.
My machine. So is this true? Are we feeding them directly through the processor?
Okay, so no. Okay, so the idea of a firmware built into the processor backdoor is meaningless. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that is because that backdoor doesn't open onto the internet without going through an internet card, through a network card, through an Ethernet card, right?
Mm.
And those cards are controlled by software. So so you need a cooperative firmware to cooperate in the cards with each other, et cetera, and that doesn't actually exist. Now, it is true to say, though, that the operating systems themselves are compromised. The rumors of backdoors in Microsoft, in Linux, any of them you care to name, are
Linux too?
accurate. Yeah, sure. Yeah, because Linux, although it's open source, look what happens. You get a company, you get the open source Linux, you put in whatever the hell CIA, NSA, or whoever wants it in there, and then you just simply offer the Linux as being for sale. How many people are never, ever, ever going to examine the kernel to see what's actually in there, never compile it themselves, and simply take your word for it that it's kosher and install it on their machine?
Then I won't change from Win 7 to Linux. I'm sticking at Win 7 because Win 8 is a mandatory cloud. And like one of my video makers says, there's no such thing as a cloud. It's just someone else's machine.
Correct. It's just basically someone else's servers. Well, yeah. All right. I wouldn't go to Linux anyway. There's hundreds of versions of Linux, but you could, if you wanted, you could compile your Linux yourself after having scanned the code and make sure that it's clean. I know a guy that's running Windows 98 simply because it was the most effective, fastest Windows ever, and he's able to maintain the operating system himself. But I would favor actually probably free BSD, okay, for a number of reasons, because it is a Unix and so on, and the source code kernels are available and it's small, but and it's also the widest used operating system on the planet. So
what? Really? What about Windows and Mac?
Nah, geez, no. There's Windows and Mac together are probably a small fraction of free BSD operating systems installed in stationary devices.
Really? Who's these people who uses everything else then? I've never seen them.
Oh, yeah, but it's like there's so much of the digital world, so much of, in terms of our discussion, that is just hidden from even the cognoscenti, okay?
Right.
I mean, how many operating systems can you name, or how many programming languages can you name?
DOS.
Okay, and see, the thing is, there are actual hundreds of programming languages.
Right.
Hundreds of them, each aiming to achieve something that the others don't. And and most people, if they're lucky, they might know Java, or they might know, something like that. They might know some word about it. But most people are not programmers, and so most of the digital world is hidden from them. My wife she's ceased being amazed by it because she understands what happens. But I can walk on up to, we would go to Europe, And for instance, we hadn't traveled there together. And in the modern period, this is like in the 94, I think. And I can walk on up to digital devices that existed in Europe at that time that didn't exist here in the United States. And I could, within a few seconds, determine what the operating parameters were of them because of general familiarity with software. And because it's software that runs on everything. And I came up from a hardware background. So I understand the primary ring in the CPU and how everything works from there out. So let me get back to our backdoor statement here. Yes, you're feeding them. Mostly, it's not doing them any good to have your data, but it's coming through the operating system backdoors, not any of the firmware. There's some area in which firmware and software merge in phones, but we don't need to get into that level of it here. But in any event, think of the poor guys at the NSA. Most to the point where the fraction is now meaningless. So we would have to say something like 99.99999999% of all of the data that NSA collects, they'll never even look at. Okay, so they may know the last time you farted and it smelled like fish. They're never ever going to find this out, right? Unless you do something. And basically, this is the way that the systems work. And I know this from having lived in the military system from the time I was born. So I was born into a system in the way most people were not, because I was born into what was the most highly regulated system that existed on the planet at the time, which was the American military-industrial complex in the 1950s. It was extremely regimented. And I learned a real truism there, that none of the things that they potentially have on you, none of your transgressions will ever amount to anything unless you step up to the level that you force someone to do something about it, right? Unless you're that much of an irritant. And then they'll dig up everything and use it to
like Alex Jones. He was actually that type of an irritant.
Correct. And it wouldn't have mattered what the deal was. So no. It does not matter what he had done. They would manufacture something to achieve their end,
which they kind of did anyway.
Exactly.
But you're right. There's so many megalomaniac in the alternative independent media who thinks they are singled out. I always say, if they ever interfere or do something with us, I'm going to be hugely honored, actually. Couldn't be more of a hallmark for becoming important, But
a real status symbol.
Yeah, but mainly they're just treating us in bulk. So there is a discrimination, but it's a bulk discrimination. But Bill Binney, you heard about him? Of NSA?
I don't think so.
Well, you should check out he was a whistleblower, like a serious, real one. Not blue chicken type. And he was, I think he was before Snowden. And he came out and explained how the NSA stuff works. So Snowden didn't really say anything new stuff. But maybe, I guess he proved it. That's the big deal. But
he provided the data.
Yeah,
correct.
That's the problem. Right. But Binney, he suggested, and this is why I think he would be interesting for you. He suggested to NSA, hey, instead of this intrusive and useless and ineffective and law-breaking way to do it,
right,
I've developed a system that on the one hand takes care of people's privacy, on the other hand actually can extract what we actually need. I mean, if you're buying into that, they're really looking for terrorists. And not manufacturing them.
Right. And there's where it all broke down.
Exactly. They wasn't interested. No, we want everything. We want everything. And we don't.
We're not interested in terrorists, guy. We don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. So you should check him out, because I guess he must be, if he's not a programmer, he at least understands these things.
Right.
Because he's been working with it. So there's no denying they're gobbling it all up, but then it becomes, I think a secondary thing that they earn on is our censorship, because we know they do it. And that goes also for the algorithm in YouTube. Either it's intended or not, it makes us behave in a certain way.
Sure. It is social engineering.
I don't want to go there in this program because then I'm losing money. You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Might lose my channel. Might get a copyright strike. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So now it's fear, now it's all the little kid mentality, fear of the parent.
Yeah.
Right? The parent that says you can't use naughty words, or you're going to suffer, right? And so we're all self-censoring. So it's like even worse than high school. It's like being back in junior high, or even elementary school, primary school, right? And so, but the system itself is the thing you really have to worry about, in my way of thinking, is not because I don't ever expect that most of us will rise up high enough to be swatted by the powers that be. Okay, we've had an example of that recently. A guy in Google was a whistleblower on Google and showed how all their algorithms are being used to target conservatives. And he spread this information out. And Google fired his ass for betraying their oath of allegiance to progressive enlightenment.
Yeah, I remember him. And wasn't he actually a left-winger originally?
Correct. I don't know about that. His politics are beside the point.
Yeah.
But he did do this. He lived in San Francisco. He goes home, and Google phones in a wellness check on him, which means they swatted him.
Wow.
In gaming terms, right? SWAT shows up. There's snipers across the street. There's helicopters overhead. There could have been submarines in the sewer for all I know, right? Mm-hmm. And they were seriously after him, and he was a threat to the general environment. And he had to answer these 6 questions because Google, the company, said to the police, this man is a danger. Go and wellness check him. And so, I mean, all kinds of major shit came down on this guy. Mm-hmm. And he could have made one wrong misstep and he could have been killed on his front door because they might have actually thought he was a real threat before they actually talked to him. The guys talk to him, tension melts, the cops wave it all down. Once he tells them what the fuck's going on, they're on his side because he's a hero in their mind, right? But Google set it up for him to be basically swatted, and that's when, because in the dynamic aspect of that encounter, he could have easily been killed, and nonetheless, it got their message across that we're big enough to have you crushed and killed for doing, and we're pissed at you for what you did. And so here is that most people won't rise to that. They won't be in an opportunity to rise to that level of annoyance to the main system. So what they really have to fear is ticking off some of the petty fascistic bureaucrats that also are within these organizations that also have access to what the machine knows. So your reference to the guy snooping on his ex-wife or girlfriend in NSA, the only way he could have done that was simply because of privilege of his employment, right? He couldn't have done that if he'd worked for Starbucks, right? Or something like that. So under the circumstances, it's these petty bureaucratic dictator guys that are going to be your largest level of annoyance within the system itself, outside of the algorithm. But the algorithms are written by software engineers. They operate under strictly mechanistic forms, and there is something here that's really true. And you just alluded to it a second ago, and that is that there's a major truism in life, a philosophical understanding that you can take with you to the grave, and it will be true between this day and that day. Mm-hmm. And I wish that day to be greatly far in the future. Yeah. But the truism is that any system left in place long enough will be gamed by humans. Mm. This is why I don't fear space aliens. You know, any space alien group that comes here, they're toast, right? Once we start crawling in the guts of their systems, they're totally screwed.
We're going to pollute them on so many levels.
Exactly.
Because a matter of war is to first get to know your enemy, but that would be the worst part of their invasion. Watching our TV shows, it's going to be horrible.
Exactly. Anyway. Lucy, you got some explaining to do.
I look forward to they get some Norwegian black metal into their...
Oh, God. Oh, my God. The horror of those aliens melting down all over.
I know. They're going to...
But there's the rub of it all is that even today, look where the heroes are within our social order that are not publicly sanctioned by the algorithm. So if it's the problem of the algorithm, of the people controlling the algorithm. The algorithm itself is not sentient. It has no understanding. It's not a thing that exists. It's a bunch of symbols on a computer program, and that's it, that are manipulated by these people. But look at what their huge problem is. The more they tighten up, as we've seen through history, the more they clamp down, the more they screw everybody into a tighter and tighter position, the more the hero object in our system of objects becomes the person standing up to and defeating, and even if they have to do it like a rat through sewer tunnels, surreptitiously, the great thing that's affecting us all. We will always put that hero status on those individuals that are standing up to the system of objects that is oppressing us.
Like Snowden, like Assange, like Ross.
All of these guys. And we see it even in the YouTube algorithm itself. So let's look at a specific example here, okay? Within the mainstream. Tim Pool. Are you aware of Tim Pool?
Yeah, I just discovered him. Yeah.
Okay, well, he went to Sweden. He walked in he put his life and body on the line. He's had people chase him down through the streets of Paris trying to beat the shit out of him. This was a guy who earned his hero mantle, in my opinion. And he is such because he was the person that was giving you the real information, boots on the ground, showing you the actual shit as it was going down, not the agenda that was being spoon-fed to you by the mainstream. Mainstream disliked him. They keep attempting to crush him. The algorithms are always skewed against him. He's always being demonetized and hassled and so on, but he keeps going. Now, their problem is just this. Everything they do to him enhances his aura within our social standing of the tribe that pays attention to news and personality even more. He gets what we call proper chops, right? I mean, proper respect for his acumen and his skill and his actions in still staying on the air and still getting the news out, still putting out the opinion in spite of the shit that he gets. And so that which does not kill me makes me stronger. And the algorithm the people that write the algorithm, some of them may know they're participating in the hermetic heuristics that make Tim Pool stronger, but they're bound by that process and they couldn't not do it if they tried. So they dare not release Tim Pool to be wild, so to speak, on YouTube, because he would go from, I don't know how many subscribers he's got now, but he would triple in a matter of days. And his views would skyrocket and he would draw so much more advertising dollars that CNN would and MSNBC would really suffer from that.
So he's individually targeted.
Correct. He's individually targeted because he rose up to a high enough level, but he's not so high that they
have to take him down.
Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein.
Right. They don't have to Epstein him. Right.
Yeah,
right.
Or drive him to suicide. You know about this Ross guy for the Free Ross movement?
Exactly. Yeah.
What's the gist of what happened there? I'm going to interview his mother, by the way. He needs attention. But what was his crime? Why did they decide that he is serious enough?
I don't know. See, I haven't investigated it to the point where I'm satisfied that I understand that.
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to say I can't comment on that yet because I'm still in my investigation phase.
Okay.
But yeah, they have, suicide is it's not a state of actually doing anything yourself. It can be done in the past tense to you, in the sense you can be suicided.
Like Epstein, yeah.
Correct. And so the nature of our language has changed. But see, they can't do that to Tim Pool. He's not danger enough to warrant it now. And if they were going to do those kind of things, then I don't know what level he would have to get. Maybe he'd have to be as big as PewDiePie to warrant that kind of thing. But if he was as big as PewDiePie, they dare not touch him, right?
Or they could do like they did with the leaker of the Clinton scandals. What's his name again? Who was quote unquote robbed?
Oh yeah.
Well, he wasn't even mugged. What was his name again? The one who actually provided.
I know. It fades so fast,
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of this. One of the,
he should be remembered.
Okay, but so going way back in our conversation, back 45 minutes or so, we were talking about whether or not they care, right? The powers that be. Do they care about this? They're so brazen and so on. I think they care desperately. They worked for centuries to keep basically a low profile. They are still doing everything they can to not associate themselves with their own past history, such as removing all of the portraits from all of the museums that show most of the royals with elongated skulls throughout the Middle Ages, right? All of these are being disappeared rapidly. Right. So they're doing things continuously to keep cleaning up their image. They care about that kind of thing for many different reasons, but they're being forced to have a faster pace because of people like you and I and the technology involved here, and the fact that individuals like myself, not necessarily you, that are able to do programming and are of a particular bent and might do things that are antisocial. And they're desperately afraid of that because the technology opens up the whole planet to control, but it also opens that control up to being fiddled with everybody it's trying to control. Mm-hmm. So imagine if the concept of hacking as an art form spread the way that parkour even, right? How many people?
Yeah, because they're cracking down on, or they have traditionally cracked down on hackers.
In a serious way.
Yeah.
But what they're doing, of course, is they're forcing it underground. And we've also gone to a certain extent, the hacking community has gone to the point of having an open-faced legitimizing of it, okay? So just like the people that wanted freedom for the Palestinians, who were basically fighters, had to create a social organization to act as their front with their liaison to the population, and also ended up with that social organization providing food, medicine, etc. Mm-hmm. The hacking community is having to do this as we've moved away from, and I say we advisedly, have moved away from lone individuals out there goofing around. Now there's conventions of hacking guys, right? And there's social status for coming up with new and better gimmicks, tricks, hacks, pops and weasels. You go there for bragging rights.
But
it's not about money.
Yes, go on.
I was going to say, it's not about money or anything at this stage. It's truly the beginning of a philosophical or ideological approach to living within the system of objects, where you as an individual say to yourself, and basically a David Icke kind of a come to a revolution of awakening within your own mind. You say to yourself, I live in a system of objects that is controlled by this technology. I can personally learn to dominate the technology at any of these levels I choose to do so. And it's just a matter of me putting in the work. And so this ethos is emerging where we have individuals that travel the world from conference to conference and conference and are lauded by their peers and the other people within the hacking community for their skills. It's the ultimate meritocracy within our consumer society of system of objects. Many of these people are quite wealthy. Many of them don't care at all about money because they've found a way to exist without it.
So there are really still hackers, because I've been looking at these new generation of hackers just as propped up fancy programmers, whereas the old school hackers, like, a Gary McKinnon or whatever,
sure,
they were really doing hacking. They were really going into the official system and subverting stuff. Whereas today it's the hostile takeover model used on hackers. Like if you're good enough, they say, hey, you work for us, or you're in deep shit.
Well, there's
because of everything we did before.
Right. There's the rub guy. Gary McKinnon was not that skilled. We know this because he got caught.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, so in my estimation, I can name you dozens of individuals, some of them now retired, that in the software world would have the same level of skill as, say, a Kintaro in firmware, and you'll never know you've been hacked. Their skill is so good.
Obviously.
And obviously
the best hackers are unknown.
Exactly. But they're alluded to within the community by appellations that, can't be connected to them via the networking software. And there's a big rub. So these guys know not only firmware, but also the software component of it all the way up. And these are the kind of people that NSA and CIA and these sorts of individuals really fear. For instance, most of the people that work for the CIA are basically as computer illiterate as the regular general population.
Right.
Okay, their IT department, however voluminous it might be and however skilled it might be, is really relatively diminutive based on the entire size of the organization. Same thing is true of any of the intel organizations, including NSA. Most of the people that work for the NSA are not particularly software literate outside of their individual domain of running their machine.
That's a generation problem, isn't it? Because they have to adjust if they want to keep doing their dirty work.
No, they don't. See, there's the rub. The transition level within open general society is if you want to stay current, if you want to be on the leading edge, you got to know what the latest, greatest phone is. So you're changing every year or every 18 months, right? Mm-hmm. But within organizational software, hardware platforms, you might still be working on a PDP-11. I know that PDP-11s are still used in the Intel industry because I actually got offered a job doing some programming on an obscure form of a Prolog that runs on one of these devices. And we're talking about government having all of this antiquated, large, basically most frequently large, constructs, and they have a historical problem, or they have a problem, and that is institutional history. So it is devastating to them when one of their deep IT guys quits because they don't have a history anymore of what happened to get them up to that point. And some of that equipment might be 25 years old. When I was working for government, I was writing software as we were digitizing the government records and government functions and stuff in the 80s and 90s. And I wrote a program that lasted 25 years in state government. It ran flawlessly for 25 years. It had never had a failure other than those times when the power went out and the computer simply could not operate. It was on a PC network that I devised at the time, and they had a daily record of working 7 days a week for 25 years, and they finally shut it down because the internet came along, and they just didn't need it anymore. They wanted to modernize. It was more convenient to do things on the internet than run this old antiquated system. So 25 years after I wrote this series of little PC programs, they still were trying to maintain that. Now, admittedly, they never had to alter it in all those 25 years. They never had to change anything. It always continued to function. The way I designed it, it worked well. I'm, puffed up here saying, I did a good job and stuff. But nonetheless, the point is that there's lots of software. Once it works and once the person that wrote it walks away, it's just basically a grit my teeth and hope to hell I can keep this thing running aspect of the government. And they're still that way.
That's reassuring.
That's what all the mainframe shit is like that, right? And by the way, you can buy used mainframes on eBay for like $100.
Right.
So if I wanted to seriously get into, that kind of thing, but it's not even necessary. With 3 or 4 Raspberry Pi single board computers locked together as a supercomputer, I can run any number of Linux programs and write an emulating program to emulate almost any mainframe operation.
And you do, don't you?
No. Actually, now I'm much more intrigued by artificial intelligence.
Right.
And that's really what I've been diving deep into, and that's why we made this.
Isn't your webbot kind of an artificial intelligence already?
Well, yeah, it had a part of it. Okay, so all right, so artificial intelligence is not really intelligence. It's just a smart software that has the ability to get new data, and the program was open enough to be able to accept new data and alter its behavior based on that new data. My problem was that I had part of that at the time, which was the machine learning, and that's why it all crapped out with the blue chickens, was because of this thing called clean label poisoning. Okay, so when you have machine learning, you can't write a software program and say, okay, software program, go on out and learn about this particular aspect of our world. You have to actually define what that software program is going to be learning on to this incredibly tedious level. Okay, so you have to build a clean data set, and the data set is called as having a clean label. So all of the items within that data set have to be individually pored over and looked at by a human and made sure that they meet the criteria to train this particular neural net. Usually this is used in a neural net kind of a software, where you don't really care about how the software derives its conclusions, the intervening steps. You just want to be able to replicate that so that you know that it reaches that same conclusion over and over again, and you throw away all these potentially millions of intervening steps to get the conclusion. And the machine, quote, learns by shoving stuff into database, and if your software is well written, you can extract from that database a new representation of the knowledge base you're attempting to look at. And I had such a thing, and it was working tediously badly, continuously, year after year after year, so I was constantly having to clean the data by hand. And but even so, it was partially a neural net, and I ran into an issue of where the data got polluted on me in an area that I had always considered to be clean. And it was because the blue chickens had an entree into a particular data set area of production. Yeah. And I didn't know it.
They worked like an enhancer of your own echo, because already you have the problem. If you put out a prediction, people will talk about that, then you have to filter that away, right, because it's a self-pollution. And then they come in, seize it, and become a megaphone and amplify that noise.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That's kind of, exactly, in layman terms.
That was exactly the case. It dominated the other data sets such that we kept drilling in on my own stuff, and they originally had stolen those memes from my own data and regurgitated them with that megaphone.
Yeah.
And within a short period of time, everything started to break. And so that's when circumstances forced me to look at things differently, and I went off and did the crypto world and involved myself in doing that.
But this explains to a far extent why you're so annoyed with that.
Oh, I was so pissed.
Because they hurt you.
Oh,
they hurt you where it counts.
And here's the thing. Okay, so it's even worse than that. Okay, and I got to admit some human frailty here. All right, that the reason that I hold the grudge so fiercely, it has to do with the cancer. All right. Oh. So I was struggling with the death of my brother, the death of my parents, the death of my in-laws, my wife's degrading health. All the while, I didn't know I had a giant cancer in me that was degrading all of my energy. And during this period of time, from certainly from 2015 onward, I had to keep spending longer and longer and longer amounts of time in this clean data process, what I called tuning the emotional engine, as I went through all this language and readjusted all these values. And instead of it had taken like 9 days to start with, and then got to taking 18 days. And this was like 18 days of incredible long hours doing this tedious work. And the reason that it went from 2015 up to 18 days within this process, each and every time I issued a report, was entirely due to the effect that was being put out there by a Gaia TV, which was the megaphone for the blue chickens, right? And so they actually caused me physical suffering because I was doing all of this in terrible health. And, then I'm not blaming them for what the fact that doctors couldn't understand that I had cancer and all of this kind of stuff. But nonetheless, I'm just blaming them for adding to my karma, but also thanking them for,
Hey, without cancer, I mean, anybody would.
Still be pissed.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Still be pissed, right. But I'm just saying that, that actually burned a hole in my colon as I had that cancer there. And of course, so that's locked into my body is this, and it's not hatred. It's not even really anger. And as I say, I'm actually grateful at a karmic level and can acknowledge that to the blue chickens for causing me so much suffering, because obviously I burnt out that part of my karma relative to that suffering in this life and need not face it in another life. Yeah. And so quid pro quo. So
yeah, and as Buddha said, suffering is gasoline for growth, to paraphrase him.
Correct. So I'm going to help the blue chickens grow.
No, but it's interesting that they're collapsing at the same time as you getting rid of your cancer.
It is. It's fitting at that level, right?
Poetic justice.
But at that level, so it was clean label poisoning. I had a neural net system that helped me because I had a dictionary that was at that point, because it was in many languages, was well over 3 million words. And so in order to tune that, I had a neural net process that did the preliminary work for me. And that's where the clean label poisoning came in, and that I kept struggling with. And then at the same time, I have to acknowledge that there was this creeping thing of censorship that slammed down on us in 2016, just as the blue chicken cult was at its peak. And so it all really hit me, and then I went through, and here we are today, right?
By the way, the guy's name that we couldn't remember, Seth Rich, of course. Seth Rich. Yes. He deserves to be remembered.
Exactly.
By the way, you're coming into shadow banning now. People don't realize that the Adpocalypse and YouTube Gate is much bigger than just spoiled brats losing money. Could you explain easily in layman terms the shadow banning phenomenon that we are so struck with at our shows?
Sure. Okay, so it has to do with the idea that since they control search, all right, so search is key when you have bazillions of things to look at. And in a human attention market, there's bazillions of things to potentially occupy your attention. And so for you to find them, you have to go through search in some form. So the people that control search control your perception of what reality is. And so they can do any number of things to the search algorithm of which you will be unaware, unless you actually look at what you're being presented and think about it, that will change your perception. And so this is where we come into shadow banning. And it is even in Twitter, where they shadow ban showing you particular tweets and so on, because you're talking in a bunch of words that is bad language and mama says you shouldn't use that. Even then, they won't necessarily forbid you to do that. Their way of shadow banning you is time. So, for instance, shadow banning on Twitter is that I write a tweet that I think is just brilliant and I push the go button, and it might be 9 hours later I get a response back to it because it's finally showing up on somebody's timeline. Whereas it used to be 3 seconds, right?
Real time, yeah.
Correct, near real time, okay? But now there's an element on it that says slow down.
They learned this, I think they learned this from Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
Facebook started that long ago.
And they've really gotten good at it or prolific at it. Twitter is also doing that now.
In fact, I had to tweak my advertisement. I realized I've seen helpless people who put up it's not called tweets on Facebook, but whatever it's called. They put up 5, 6 in a row. They don't realize that those posts are competing with each other for the attention of the person's listeners. Yeah, I realized I had to wait at least 12 hours before putting out a new post so as to maximize the impact of my post. See what I mean?
Correct. And so you're actually analyzing what you're interacting with and responding to the algorithm and what it's doing with you. And so we've seen that in this last round, what they did at YouTube was to heighten the shadow banning. So once they took away the recommended things where you had the ability as a creator to recommend fellow creators that you thought was harmonious with your work to your audience, once that was taken away, and then they had the general recommendations, and ultimately it's just recommendations for only the mainstream guys that pay them shitloads of money. But they started doing other aspects of the shadow banning on YouTube. And again, it's done through search and control there. So if I were to go and hunt for any of the personalities in the woo-woo world. Now, the woo-woo world is interesting because it's all full of conspiracy language about all kinds of things, space aliens and all of this kind of stuff. And so for the is greatly dismissed, but it is one of those areas that is intensely occupied the algorithm creators for the various parts of YouTube. And it's sort of like a test bed because it is so prolific of prohibited words and thoughts. That this is where you've got to go check your algorithms out if you want to deal with it. So the people in the woo-woo world that get impacted by these algorithms will do so long before the algorithms are expressed into the larger domains of entertainment on YouTube.
And politics.
So correct, and all the others. And we get it here first, and we get it here worst, is basically where we're at, right? But one of the things they're now doing is that when you search for, let's say we're going to hunt for David Wilcock on YouTube. And two things about that. David Wilcock, when you hunt for him in a search there, now they're trying to show you only the exact number of actual videos in which David Wilcock is involved. Okay? And used to be...
You mean personally or just his name?
No. In the video itself, you have to say the name David Wilcock because they ran into this situation where people were putting on shoe ads and any other kind of thing, but they were just putting David Wilcock in the description line or in the tagline in order to get as clickbait to try and drive traffic, right? And so they ratcheted down on that. And David Wilcock got quite flustered and pissed off because he thought he was any told everybody he was being personally targeted, that there were 5 million videos of his out there on YouTube, and they took it down to 3 million or 2 million and 1 million and so on, right? And what's happening was he didn't recognize or chose to ignore that the number of times the repetition of his name and description and taglines influenced how many times it showed up in search. But they did actually alter the search, and they're trying to change the way that search works for those kind of things to where it's much more accurate and it can't be ballooned out of proportion. But there's another aspect of this. When I search for David Wilcock, now I'm presented with only old videos. Okay, because there's a subtle clue there. Oh, well, there's no new video here. Why, geez, look, the top dog last video is 7 months old. This guy is, fallen off the YouTube wagon or isn't making videos anymore. I better go and look for something else to look at. Not knowing that if you just went on up and changed the search parameter to sort it based on
date, right.
current time, you'd end up with a ton more that you just aren't being presented with. Right. And so they determined that they're using all of these subtle techniques to try and influence your mind, and these are the techniques of shadow banning. Yeah. They're not actually banning Wilcock videos. They're whittling him down. Now, they're not even doing it to David Wilcock. He's not big enough to warrant getting fucked with personally.
Or he's not actually being a real system critic enough. They need decoys like him.
Correct. He's a player. Yeah.
I'll give you a real example that I noticed, because everything I know is just things I've observed and learned that way.
Well, sure.
And one thing I did observe, for the longest time I made it go sport in liking good videos of other, because I believe in the synergetic effect, not the old school scarcity competition model, but you rub my back, I rub yours, what goes around comes around. So, okay.
Sure.
So I liked a bunch of lo and behold, usually subversive, system power critical. And what happened was that they didn't even show up. I was annoyed. Hey, I'm clicking like. Why isn't it on my liked videos? I went back, I refreshed, I clicked. It took me a long time to realize it's deliberately buried. They won't even show it. The only way they would show it was if I went into the playlist itself and scroll through
and mucked with the settings.
Yeah, but on the front page of my channel, stuff like, let's say, Corbett Report wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
And it's not a channel that wouldn't show up, it was the video. Sometimes some of their videos would show up, sometimes not. It depended on what the video was about. Again, pointing to an algorithmic match or trigger, right? So
Correct.
That's soft censorship deluxe, if ever there was one. It's invisible where it counts. You see what I mean?
Sure. But look where it's going to go. Let's project a little bit here too. They've been getting better at it. Okay, they're hiring smarter and smarter people. But right now, the big thing that we could go into various different aspects of this for hours, including the problems that the big tech companies are having hiring senior, talented people at the software engineering and the programming levels. They're having a real problem with it. And then there's all this bad code they're trying to maintain, and it's sucking down all kinds of resources. But nonetheless, let's look at the idea that over time, the algorithms are going to get better and more expansive in what they're able to do. There's the other aspect of it, and that is that it takes one brilliant idea and one dedicated 16-year-old to code an elegant, released into the wild, public domain solution to all of this. So say that there's AI that gets to the point where it really, really, really can screw with the results that it presents to you on YouTube. Doesn't take much for an individual with a few hours of time and the skills and the interest to sit down and write their own AI that would take the output from the JavaScript queries on YouTube's post and get statements and craft an AI to get you exactly what you want out of YouTube and bypass all the ads.
Yeah, for that person. Yeah, that person. But what about everybody else?
That's why we get back to the idea that the hacker community is morphing. It's growing and it's morphing. This, I think, is a natural response to the conditions under which we are living now within the system of objects here. Okay, what used to be called consumerism, I'm calling a system of objects, and that within this system of objects, we now find that the people we dynamically praise, if we're young enough to be aware of them even, are the cool kids on the block are the hackers, right? Mm-hmm. And the next cool group after that, the ones that really feed them, are the gamers. Mm. And the gamers, everybody bemoans all these kids being locked into this symbiotic relationship with their screens and these games all the time. But some of them are actually able to become wealthy because of the cachet upon which we put on these games, and also bear in mind that some of the poor, cheap, crappy games are having mega competitions that draw more people and spend more money than the Super Bowl. And so they're huge and they're gigantic, and there's a big chunk of our social order of the new generations that are involved in games. And from there, we get the hacker crowd who want to game, who look up from the game they're playing to see the system running the game and say, I want to game that. And I love these kids. They are just, many of them are ethical beyond anything I would have expected to have seen.
There is some kind of moral there.
Exactly. And it's beyond what I would have seen in my generation. We've got guys that are dedicated to live without money because it's not necessary. They can make money in any number of ways as they need it, and they're not particularly worried about their future because they see themselves living in this system of objects and the system never going away. Ergo, why should I be concerned about saving for my retirement when I know that when it comes time to that, I'll just hack whatever money I need out of that system, right?
Yeah. As long as money is numbers in a computer. Yeah.
Exactly. And as long as the computers exist and electricity exists and so on, it is an entirely different philosophy. And they've never known any other world, whereas I personally have. So I can envision that world that we're in right now not existing. But they can't. And so I cannot find flaw in their philosophical approach. And as I say, I applaud these kids because they've turned their minds to education, not schooling, and they've educated themselves on how the system of objects works that is enslaving most of their peers and has dominated their life, and they are quite literally, quite actually hacking the system, and that's what they do.
So they're training, so the games are training them to take on bigger tasks and more important tasks in the future. I've always regarded these gaming YouTube vids that gets millions of hits. They're the male equivalent to the bimbos who put out hair videos and makeup videos. But the big difference, like you're pointing out, is that these guys are actually getting a useful education and they're using it against the system. So it's actually in the long run for a better cause. So now, you've whitewashed them in my eyes.
Well, I'm not trying to whitewash them. I'm just
but that's the effect of what you said anyway. So
right, okay, and so I'm just wanting to point out the balance. Right, I'm a Taoist. Everything exists in a state of balance or imbalance, but the universe is a self-correcting system, and there is dichotomy everywhere, duality. And so even within the hacking community, being portrayed as the ultimate bad guys, the ones causing all the problems that are hacking Tesla cars and this kind of shit. Even within that description of them, I find many truly heroic individuals that meet all the criteria for being a hero in my eyes. And I got some tough criteria. So I find that extremely encouraging. It didn't exist in my generation. My whole generation ran up against at least in the United States, we're burnt out in the anti-war efforts, right?
Yeah.
And all of that kind of stuff, and we were derailed and so on. And there were just an extremely small number of individuals that managed to rise out of that stew to take this particular path. Now, I look and I see the post-millennial generations, very large, in my opinion, very significant segments of that population are within the Venn diagram of these, from which we get this admirable subpopulation. And it only takes that one 16-year-old...
What age group are you referring to here?
Oh, I'm talking 12-year-olds to, say, 40-year-olds, right? I mean, Kintaro, let's see, what's he? He's 50.
Millennials are like 30, so that's millennials. 20, 30, that's millennials, right?
I think millennials are 20s, 30s, right? But it's the post-millennial generation that I'm usually dealing with. Kids
about under 20, yeah, okay.
Yeah, or under 20, and then there's another group that's like 40s to 50s, right? So maybe early millennials.
No, that's Generation X.
Okay, Generation X then.
Yeah, I know, because I'm there.
Oh, okay. All right, then. Okay, so Kintaro, I think, is Generation X. Okay, and he's a famous guy out of Japan and a hero hacker, right? He's more firmware, but in any event, though, so...
we had the first hackers, that's right. We had the first hackers, our generation. Go on.
Right, because I was in my 30s when computers were really.
You don't count. You're like.
No, I'm an old fart. Right.
No, but you're like a dinosaur who actually managed to put on a monkey suit and live on with us monkeys. You know what I mean? You didn't die out.
I know what you're doing. I know.
Anyway, go on.
Okay, so in any event, though, so I'm dealing with the 16-year-old groups that in the hacking community, and as I say, these kids, they're exemplary. So we can take, I don't know how old Tim Pool is. I think he's late millennials, so he's probably late 20s or something, right?
Yeah.
And so he represents that, and he is an icon to this hacking generation. And as I say, it's only going to take that one 16-year-old to make all this connections and put all this together. And then when he does that, he'll just set up a GitHub account and release it into the wild. And after that, it's like nobody can stop it. It's on its own, right? The truly distributed aspect of our social order. Now, here's the thing. Okay, so if we examine at a very core level, and absurdly, everybody's going to think this is stupid to even think about it this way, but it points to something that is so slap you in the face, it's hard to deny. Humanity ain't centralized. We're distributed. We're decentralized. Every human is an island, okay? All humans must cooperate.
Yeah, by nature, you mean, by nature.
By nature, correct. Yeah. As a Taoist, I look to nature for all of my guiding principles. And the guiding principle is that all of us humans are, in fact, isolated individual creatures, and that actually causes many of our desperate needs to feel community, connection, cohesiveness, right? And it drives that because we truly are isolated.
And it explains the predicament we're in, because the system has never been more centralized than today. So there is an inherent clash between nature and the system. Yeah.
And what is the system attempting to do? It's attempting to systematically control the ultimate decentralized environment. So it is doomed to never succeed, in spite of the fact that it has a goal of total control. It'll never, ever succeed. And the closer it comes to succeeding, the more that distributed distributed environment of humanity is going to react to that attempt and become more uncontrollable. And
so an X factor will emerge.
Correct. At its zenith, the empire is the weakest because its next step is downward.
Good point.
Okay, and so, this is just the nature of the reality in which we're in. Now, the reality that we're in at the moment is that the empires are no longer going to be geopolitical. They are going to be digital. And so we're going to start seeing different empires clashing on the digital environment because it's now safe to do so. And we're, in fact, even seeing that. Look at recently here in the United States, there was a big brouhaha about Epoch Times. Okay, Epoch Times is part of a media company called New Tang Dynasty. As the name implies, it's Chinese. These particular subset of Chinese that form New Tang Dynasty are practitioners and adherents to a cult called Falun Dafa.
Falun Gong.
Falun Gong, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and New Tang Dynasty is their media arm. Okay, New Tang Dynasty is their army, their empire, as their name implies, dynasty, that is going to be multi-generational. Its goal is to be the Falun Dafa, Falun Gong's presence digitally in these wars that are going on in the digital environment.
But they're also financing neocon politicians in America, war-mongering politicians.
No, I'm not saying they're good guys. I'm just saying look at the environment in which we're in.
Yeah.
Now that we're moving to these digital environments. So it's gotten to the point where if you get on YouTube here in the United States and you're within the conspiracy world, you cannot avoid the Epoch Times ads.
Right.
So 80% of the people on YouTube are male. Males have particular susceptibility to specific kinds of ads. Epoch Times is using all of the correct words within their ads. Their ads are extremely well produced. I mean, I got to give them serious credit for being the state of the art in digital or in video advertising on YouTube for their particular purpose. And they should probably get awards for there's nothing spectacular. They're just good. Their language is good. They're tight. They're controlled. They're going to be very effective. And this has got all kinds of people upset because they've seen now that a certain amount of money allows a disenfranchised group to become maybe a major dominant player in some of our digital landscape. So there's the rub. Because digital world, sci-fi world is dynamic and is energetic and is no longer time-based in the sense of, in fact, our time scale is shifted. As I alluded to earlier, computers sit there most of the time just looking at the clock, looking at that piezoelectric bit of crystal vibrate, waiting for you to do something so it can interact. But it's looking at that clock 32,000 times a second, more or less. And so we're now operating at a world where time is sliced at that level. And as a result of that, things can happen dynamically that have never, ever been able to happen before, where actual digital world could be overturned overnight, the same way that guy got burned by a $100,000 advertising bill just because he was a little bit tipsy when he put in that advertising contract. You could go to bed one night and wake up in the morning because that 16-year-old kid wrote that chunk of software and released it out in the world. Your whole world could change. Now, the powers that be have a UFO problem here with us. Okay, and in the UFO world, they say the powers that be can never admit that UFOs exist at a serious level because it shows how weak they are, and they won't be the powers that be anymore because they can't keep our airspace from being violated and humans from being abducted and anal probed. Okay,
yeah, that's one perspective.
Or hybridized.
Yeah.
But that's the one that is most commonly referred to as one of the primary reasons for our current secrecy around UFOs and all of this technology.
No, well, we just, it's funny because I sat on a show for a year, not deliberately, but we're so slow getting stuff out. I sat on a show for a year, got it out on YouTube, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and it was among our top video. It had done as well as, videos being out there for 3 years. It had like 100,000 overnight. I was shocked to my core, and that was the secret space program thing.
Yeah, got it.
And there we found another approach, and it may not be either or, like, we pointed out. And that's that they don't want us to know that it is human technology, because for obvious reasons. Better let them think it's alien and then let the wackos run with it and let the masses be numb to it. But I'm not saying it's either or. I think it's maybe a both.
It's both
and. Yeah.
But here's the situation. Getting back to the both and part of that as well. In finishing this thought here on these kids. Sure. Okay, so the powers that be have a situation here where the dynamic nature of the internet and the fact that time is happening at 32,000 times a second instead of the clock ticking once a second means that the acceleration of events is so potentially fast as to sweep the chairs out from underneath them literally overnight. And they fear this greatly. And so their UFO problem is us. We are the UFOs to the powers that be because we could be weaponized and we could be the unsettling event that just occurs and they cannot stop it. They can't see it coming. They know it's coming. All of the scientists they hire hypothesize and predict that it's coming without being able to say when it's coming. And they're doing everything they can to set up all sorts of roadblocks to prevent it coming. But in essence, even the smart ones in the powers that be know that every single roadblock that they set up actually is going to the point of universe, which is to train and challenge that mind even more to get it to occur.
We are the X factor. I love it.
Yes, we're dangerous. We're really dangerous. Wow. Well, like what was that? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. After the Earth was destroyed, we were mostly harmless.
Right. But by the way, I'm going to ask you about the bot farms and all that. But one thing first. All right. The dark web, you mentioned it before today. I'd like you to explain that briefly in layman terms too.
Sure. It's real simple. Okay, you know that all of the web is actually files on a server. Okay, so your web page is actually a file on a server someplace. That file has a label. Whatever its name is, the last few letters of that file are HTML.
Right.
Okay. All right. So the dark web, and so they can search. Google and all these people can search and put into their database any file that's got a something .htm, .html, .xml,
PHP.
Exactly. Any of these particular extensions on the file name are part of the internet. And so there's a transfer protocol, the HTTPS, that transfers files based on what their file name is, basically. Okay, that's really what it amounts to. Mm-hmm. All right. The dark web has a .onion.
What?
Yeah. It's
literally.
It's a file name. It's a group of file names that have it's file names that have a group of different extensions on the end of it. Actually, .onion, called the Onion Network or the Tor network. Okay, to get at it.
Oh yeah, Tor. Yeah.
Right. So the Tor network refers to the torrents, streaming, etc. And to get at the dark web, you have to use a special kind of a browser called a Tor browser. Most of the Tor browsers that are out there use an onion as their symbol for peeling back.
Oh, I tried that, but it wouldn't let me into Facebook or anything. It was like warning.
No. It doesn't do any of that. Okay, so it doesn't look at any HTML pages at all.
Oh, okay.
It is to point to look at the others, the .onion pages, okay? But you got to know what the hell you're doing when you go out on the dark web, because it's not like the HTML in the sense that your IP address and all of these kind of things leave trails on the dark web as to who you are. And many of the places on the dark web are traps. They have traps in there to get information out of you, and it'll cause you some real serious problems to get out there not knowing what you're doing. It's not the clean, nice corporate HTML world. This is the true dark web. You can lose your probably potentially your life.
This is in shamanic terms the underworld.
Okay, and exactly. Let's look at it that way. Mm-hmm. The problem, the thing about the dark web is the thing about the internet that most people don't understand. They think that Google indexes the internet, and you ask people, well, what does Google do? Well, they go and they index the internet and keep a track of all of the pages, and I can search it, and they tell me where the stuff is. And you say, well, okay, and do you think Google ever misses anything? Oh, yeah, I imagine Google misses a few pages because, I'm creating a page now and they won't know about it until they look at it. Mm-hmm. And then you become shocked to understand that Google only indexes 3% of the internet.
Wow.
And that's 3% of the HTML pages. Not 3% of everything.
Right.
Just 3% of the HTML pages.
Jeez.
And this is Google's, and they're working their ass off just to maintain these humongous large databases that are so large, whole buildings are devoted to getting rid of the heat from the computers. And they're working their ass off just to maintain an index of only 3% of the internet. Mm-hmm. And this is 3% of the HTML, let alone the dark web. So when you go on the dark web, there are not search engines, at least none that I would trust. Mm-hmm. So, but it's an entirely different.
So you have to know where you're going then.
It's kind of like, if you got to ask, you shouldn't be there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And usually I go there because I'm invited to specific events, or there's somebody that I know that has sent me a specific point of reference to stuff. Now, here's the beauty of this.
Wait a minute. Wasn't the Ross thing, wasn't that his problem, that he actually offered something similar, only made it whiter in a way, more accessible to people?
Yeah, but people were being harvested as a result. Because, see, the thing is that I don't want to get in and bore people with technical details.
No.
Okay, but I get really paranoid going onto the dark web, and I might use like 3 or 4 VPNs and two interconnected Tor browsers, because the real weakness of the dark web is when you jump onto it and jump off, you expose your true IP addresses and these kind of things. And there's people that are at those junction points that have traps.
Is file sharing a part of it, like peer-to-peer?
Oh, sure. And I say the beauty of the dark web to me, though, is that if you want to talk whistleblowers, there's whistleblowers out there in abundance. If someone was a real legitimate journalist and they had some way of not being shot in the head for getting this information, they could go out on the internet and have an entire career just harvesting freely available information on the dark web that whistleblowers have put up about all the dirty deeds being done everywhere.
But I mean, like mainstream file sharing, like Vuse, Acerus, I don't know what they're all called, like torrent file sharing.
Sure, that kind of stuff.
Am I risking anything doing that? Because they have mainstream browsers, not browsers, but they have these software that does it for you and kind of protects you.
No. You can't. Dark web isn't like that. Anybody trying to sell you that is trying to scam you.
Uh-oh.
Okay, it is. There are streaming services out there. For instance, I know streaming services for software and even movies and stuff on the dark web.
And music.
I don't do music, so I just don't know them, right?
Okay.
But I will look at videos, and I certainly go through the software. But it's dangerous. I mean, we can't, because not only are there legitimate bad actors out there, but there's also the professional organizations trying to keep their skills up, right? And so you get all of the CIA kind of guys and everything training on the dark web in what they think are isolated sandboxes, and they sure as hell hope that they're isolated, which sometimes they're not. But anyway, so strange stuff happens out there, but it is the saving grace of humanity. The fact that most people don't understand that 97% of the legitimate internet is not indexed, and you'd have a hard time finding. And then most of the internet is not this legitimate HTML. There's far more activity happening on the dark web. That's really, I think, as I say, the savior for humanity, because it'll always be constantly boiling, and will never be shoehorned into the social media exclusively.
That's the frontier you talked about then.
Correct. And unfortunately, it's been overused, but the idea of a digital frontier. Now, the digital frontier does not remove or does not provide the safety valve that we saw within Blade Runner, for instance, or many of these dystopian near-term future movies, right, where the Earth is under environmental stress of whatever cause. And one of the things you can do is flee to other planets if you're pissed off at the ruling organizations and the structure and the overbuiltness and so on here of our little planet. And we don't have that yet. But I suspect we're not that far off. I'm hoping it's only 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Interesting. We'll look out for that. But I remember back in the day there was some software that was taken down that had this principle, I guess, dark web. It was this music. What was it called?
Oh, you're talking about the Napster, the file.
Yeah, stuff like that.
No, that ran on HTML though. See, that was
okay.
That was on the legitimate side of things.
Right. Okay. Well, hey, we are pressed for time actually when I consider what's left to discuss and where we're at.
Sure.
So let's see if you can comprise because one thing I'm noticing in our shows is that some shows, nothing will happen, and some, for a weird reason, get targeted. Like if we discuss the Bormann and especially the Hitler survival, we get shills, bots, trolls, and whatnot. And the same goes, by the way, for the classified space program. So I'm wondering if you could, and how can we know the difference? I mean, I've been good at tangoing with some of these. I'm doing a sociological study in these kind of responses. Anything that's not legitimate commenters. I don't mean any negative comments. Criticism is good, but I'm talking about agenda-driven or just just trolling or bots or whatever. And so I'm discussing with them, and then I can kind of becomes kind of apparent whether, very apparent this is a bot. And then, this must be a shill. This is just a troll. But, it's very interesting for me. I'm learning a lot. They think they're distracting my energy, which is often the point, right? But no. And also we do it with humor, so it becomes entertaining for other people to see it. Because in general, we have above average intelligence in our comment fields from listeners. And if it wasn't like that, it would be much harder to smoke out trolls and shills, right? But because we have rather lucid,
more articulate,
articulate and everything, so then it becomes even easier. But I want you to give us a take on this phenomenon.
Well, it's easy to write them. Okay, so anybody that wants to know can go on out and just put in chat/bots. And there's a bunch of free ones you can go and download and run on your own machine and interact with. And they're written in dozens and dozens of languages. I was just actually yesterday looking at some code in Prolog for a chatbot. And you can make them.
Usually they just come with slogans.
Well, there's the rub. They have to have something to work off of, right? So they have to have a knowledge base that they're representing. And so a chatbot is a very crude form of AI. All AI, by the way, will never ever be sentient. No software will ever be sentient. We never have to worry about AI that way. We have to worry about the evil scum that's going to be using the AI. Yeah. But all AI is the sort of a self-referential or self-cleaning form of a database. The software is not aware of you, but they've got to have a knowledge base from which to work. And so you hit the exact nail on the head, so to speak here. Linguistically, you can look at a comment and say, oh, well, that's an articulate human expressing a complex thought. And this other statement is emotionally flat, or it's emotionally very tense, but it's crudely expressed, few words in a very simplistic fashion, and doesn't use a lot of compound structures or interesting linguistic structures. And so you can tell that way that one of them is likely to be automated, and because it's working off of a narrow knowledge base and is thus limited in its responses, and will soon, as you point out.
And also have to pick up on the words you use, right, in order to give a reply?
Correct. Exactly so. Exactly so. So you can have a reply to somebody, and I'll do that. I used to. I don't do it anymore because I just don't have the time, and nor do I have the inclination. But when I suspected that I would be dealing with things that were a bot, or I suspected that someone had posted something that was a bot, I would reply with something that was out of domain. Okay, so if the subject of a video and a comment on a video I suspected was a bot, and the subject of the video was chocolate, then I might respond to something about it with a horse or a dolphin. Because if it is echoed in a particular way, then it's a bot simply echoing back my own language. Yeah. If, on the other hand, the guy comes back and says, what the hell, dude? Yeah. then you've got an idea that you're dealing with a consciousness, right? Mm-hmm.
But you talked about bot farms in a video.
Okay, now that's different, though. Okay, those kind of bot farms are a tool. Okay, so what they do is they have these racks that are huge sometimes, but let's just say that there's a rack that holds a dozen phones on it. All the phones are wired to a central controlling computer, and each of the phones is given an individual IP address as though it was being held by an individual human, and they try and get the IP addresses as scattered as widely as possible so it doesn't look like they're all showing up from Da Nang at the same time, right? And then they have a software that has these phones act like a regular human thumbing through things in Facebook or on YouTube or on Twitter or any of the other social media where advertising is involved. And that's how they gain advertising. And so what they'll do is they'll have a farm go and have hundreds, potentially, maybe even thousands of cheap phones all watching a YouTube video that they were paid to have that's bought views. And so when they buy a view.
Hang on, let me tell you something quick.
Sure.
At the end of when I did Facebook advertisement, back when I ran that school, I noticed something strange happening because I was paying for clicks, right? I didn't want to pay for views. I want to pay for actual, because I figured if I can make them see my stuff, then it's my job to make them come into my page, click through. Right. If they don't do that, that's on me. Right. All I want is to get that exposed. And that worked like a charm. Then suddenly, gradually, and started to notice all these like Asian dudes, like Chinese and Indian, and they were completely, this doesn't, Arabian name, this doesn't cope with my message and my target group. What the suck is going on here, right? And that's when I realized I can't trust this stuff anymore. Somehow, I thought it was Facebook that was bullshitting me, like giving a lot of fake accounts just to, take my money.
No. Facebook themselves were being gamed.
Right.
And you were just the corollary innocent, the collateral damage.
Yeah.
You were the guy that was actually paying for it all.
Yeah.
And so actually we see some interesting juxtapositions. So for instance, I kind of chuckle every time I see an Epoch Times ad attached to any of the videos I watch, because they're never going to sell me anything. The Epoch Times is supporting the blue chicken cult, and they've just lost the money that they just paid to my friend, because Epoch Times is trying to sell me their stuff through my friend's video, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of just it's just a little curiosity. But these farms, getting back to those, these farms are just individual IP addresses, internet protocol addresses that dial up on command for money and stream through that device to no intelligence, no consciousness, no person whatsoever, whatever video they're paid to do so. And those are racked up as views. So here we are in a global attention market. We've shifted over from in our system of objects from the phase of consumerism and into the phase of attention. Yeah. And here are people gaming the system already and selling attention for humans that are mythical, that don't exist.
Fake attention, yeah.
Right, fake attention. Mm-hmm. And the advertisers are rather upset because it's rough, all right? Mm-hmm. As you know from being an advertiser, it's rough to make money in the digital world, and you can easily do things wrong, and the conditions are changing so dynamically that even if you're doing things right today, that necessarily
it's wrong tomorrow,
won't necessarily survive through until tomorrow.
Exactly.
And you have to learn all over again and entirely new whatever the hell just to be able to keep surviving.
And that's a full-time job.
And you're not making that much money at it. Right? So it's rough out there. It's tough. And you really resent putting your money to those bots. Mm-hmm. And because it's capital that you had to lay out in the hope of getting a return on it, and you're not, and they didn't tell you that. There's no disclaimer on Facebook saying 12% to 22% of the advertising dollar you're going to spend is going to be wasted on bots. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they got sued by that. And what they do, they paid off the people that sued them just to shut them up so that they wouldn't have a general advertiser revolt. But then they had it.
The social media got sued by the advertisers?
No. Facebook's got sued for way back in the day for advertisers paying for bots, for fake accounts,
right?
Paying for ads on fake Facebook accounts.
Yeah, because everybody probably thought like me, this is Facebook rigging the system.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And so Facebook got sued, and they paid off the people that sued them so it wouldn't morph into a giant class action. And then they put out the word that they were going to address the bot problem, and then they went on to other stuff, and it sort of disappeared from people's consciousness. But it also, the nature of advertising changed at that point. And you saw all different kinds of advertising things change. But see, here's the deal on all of this, and here's why it persists. It's that 200,000 view overnight kind of thing, right? So imagine the guy with the $100,000 in ad costs. So he made a mistake. He put out his ad. He wakes up in the morning expecting to have spent about $2,000. He expected to have spent about $2,000 overnight, and he wakes up to find that he had spent over $100,000, and the two credit cards he was using to back this thing are now maxed out and locked. Mm-hmm. Okay, and everybody's calling him and is on his case. Now, it could have been that 3 hours later, he might have been the happiest guy on the planet when it turns out that his advertising was so spot on that for every dollar he spent, he made back 10.
But he was tipsy. And to the box.
But so the moral is don't drink before you do this. But the point of the story I'm telling here is the potential exists for that level of return. Okay, right. So I was actually doing ads on Twitter where I was able to get an 82% click-through rate.
That's good. I know that from Facebook days. That's good.
Right. That's phenomenal. And I was doing it on the cheapest possible words that were costing me 1/3 of a cent each. And I was reaching the targeted audience I wanted to reach. Mm-hmm. And the usual cost on those words were $30 and $40 each. Mm-hmm. per click through. So I knew what I was doing with it, and it's possible to do that level of return that one need not worry about that $100,000 capital expenditure because it's part of a $10 million net gain, right?
Yeah, but can't you put a cap anyway on how much you spend? I think you can.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. He just put his cap in the wrong place.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
it was all based on time for him, and he just wasn't paying attention, and he put the cap in the wrong spot.
It's very complicated. I feel for him. It's who can blame him?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it can, and especially if you're not a software guy and you don't really have ingrained into you, well, anyways, but yeah, I feel for him. But see, he sort of evened out in the end. I think was a small net loss, but that's the way it is with all the kinds of advertising. Your advertising can simply be bad. But nonetheless, we now have the situation where for basically small money, one can get huge returns on advertising, and so the nature of the world has changed. So just as the powers that be now have to contend with PewDiePie, and they can't do shit with that guy because he's approaching 100 million subscribers or some outrageous amount, and he's essentially king of a country larger than Britain by far.
No, nobody is untouchable. Alex Jones was big too, and
no.
I've seen PewDiePie complain about stuff. So
sure. And there's irritations. You're going to get the irritations and so on. But see, they can't just get rid of him. And their problem is, but see, their problem is that the way the system is set up, the potential for a PewDiePie to be created virtually overnight is going to escalate to where we're actually going to get to the point where it's no longer, the flavor of the month. It'll be the flavor of the minute. Okay. Wow. And we're going to have dynamic levels of change within our social operating system, so to speak.
So the digital 15 minutes of fame, the digital version,
is now going to be digital 15 milliseconds. and yet some of those people will be able to take the 15 milliseconds and achieve for themselves long-lasting intergenerational power. Mm-hmm. And this has the powers that be really freaked out. Mm-hmm. And they do everything they can to corrupt the system such that those people that get to that level become subsumed in,
Yeah, but see, here's the other part of the equation you haven't touched, and that's that probably precisely because of what you just said, TPTB also do this stuff, because I've seen like lame politicians who nobody cares about having lots of Twitter followers, and it turns out they are bots. Sure. And it's the same thing with the polls. When you look at the polls today, the political polls, like the primaries and stuff, first off, they only use landlines so that they make sure only the rich and the old, the clueless people, not representative of the masses. Yeah. And then again, they select special polls so that they get those that are more tweaked in favor of what they seek. And then again, you have even rigging of polls. And so it's the same thing. In a way, the attention market online is kind of poll related, yep. Right? So if you have like 1 million followers on Twitter, it's kind of the same as polls. So I think the powers that be also use these bots, no?
Certainly. They use whatever tools that they find. I mean, they use the criminal gangs in Prohibition every bit as much as they use the people that were trying to crush the criminal gangs. So
I just felt that needed to be pointed out too.
And I respect that, actually. And we're in a kind of a funny situation here, right? Mm-hmm. And just because they're doing that, they discover it as a useful tool, and thereafter they go ahead and apply it to their own people and so on. But it does not in any way actually really negate their being subsumed by the same system of objects. So here's basically, if we take any kind of a message here, the individuals that you and I are going to be able to communicate will be able to see themselves as a separate, discrete individual human operating in a system of objects that is planetary, it is pan-global here, and be able to say to themselves that they are independent of that system of objects, even though it is pushing on them and directing their activities to a certain extent. And they will become self-aware within the system of objects. The powers that be are as trapped, in my opinion, especially many of the members of the powers that be, are as trapped within the system of objects as everyone else, and they're unable to see themselves within that system and see how they themselves are being manipulated by the very tools that they use.
They're like the right hand of the body trying to control the entire body.
Correct. And it is the system of objects is going to become even more complex as we go forward. So it could be that you could describe in the time of Plato an educated man in that world might have been someone that had read 4 books. When most of the planet was illiterate and didn't read, a truly educated man might have been considered someone that had read 4 books. And then ultimately you had to read 4 books to graduate from college. In fact, in the early days, when you went to college, you were said to have read a course of work. So I might have been a philosopher, and so it was said that I read philosophy at college. And it meant that you had read all the books in philosophy and you knew philosophy and you graduated, et cetera, et cetera. And now an educated person is an educated person who admits to a huge area of ignorance in the rest of the world around them. So in the time of Plato and the time of the first colleges in Cadiz and Seville, in Spain in the Moorish times, even you would have people that would be educated. They would be cultured, as we might say. They would have the height of the culture.
Toledo had the edge of not just being educated, but they got inputs from 3 different cultures and religions. Put them ahead.
And they were also knew all aspects of. Okay, so they knew it all the way down to they had an understanding of hygiene, and they had an understanding of music. They had an understanding of farming. They had an understanding of cooking.
Multidiscipline,
Exactly. What we these days place a high value on by calling polymaths, people that understand more than one domain. Well, this is going to become extremely key as we go forward, simply because of the burgeoning number of new domains that are piling on to us continuously within our digital environment will overwhelm the ability of any consciousness to pay attention to anything other than a small fraction of it. Mm-hmm. Or we'll have to be serially educated in the sense that, well, in my past I was educated about XYZ, and today I'm educated about, this aspect of gaming or whatever, and so in that, but I'm absolutely abysmally ignorant of music, or I'm totally ignorant of sports, and so on. And so I know nothing of the personalities that are doing anything in there. And I can say quite factually that my level of, personally right now, my actual level of knowledge about people in the gaming industry is piss poor. Mm-hmm. I know of them and of things, but not really about what's going on. Mm. And it's because there's just too much to involve oneself in. So if I'm going to concentrate on artificial intelligence, I can't concentrate on gaming software or any other aspect of it, those kind of things, right? And the all of those nasty little rotten 16-year-olds out there are inventing new things to be concerned about, new draws on our attention market faster than I can even catalog them. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be getting this way. And so that's really the singularity. It has nothing to do with transhumanism or all of us becoming computers or any of that. Right. It actually has to do with, conceptually, we're going to be facing a world in which we try and define ourselves amongst ultimate freedom. That ultimate freedom being the freedom to place your attention on anything you choose to want to do it, and there is more choices than you could ever even catalog in a lifetime, let alone explore.
Mm-hmm. But this attention battle, you can see that in that it's been revealed that the powers that be, and with that I mean not just state actors like Intel, but even like private corporations, Monsanto for example, they hire, I guess it's what's called troll farms, but they hire shills, they hire people who are supposed to go out there and...
reputation management.
Yes,
that's what it's called.
Either they want to debunk something, like on our Hitler. We have one guy on the Hitler escape, one of the Hitler escape video. He's assigned to comment on any, like lucid person showing signs of getting, maybe this is something in it, and then he comes with his ready debunking stuff. It's like he's monitoring that. Yeah. You have other kinds too, people who are ridiculing stuff, scaring, you're a lunatic if you believe this. You have people that are meant there to draw our attention, to drain us so that we can be creative. Just, they're not interested in debate or anything, it's just interested in bickering and stealing energy. So they have different approaches from these shills that I call them. Because I don't mind if someone is partisan, like I believe in something, therefore I go online and do something, like a skeptic, for example. These are people who are paid for it. And I think I figured out how to distinguish between those who have their heart in it, like fanatics, lunatics, like skeptics, and just people who do it for money. But could you address this phenomenon?
Mostly it doesn't bother me personally because I rarely comment. I never read any comments on anything I put up. I never restrict comments and I never have mods because I basically don't give a damn.
Right.
So I'm some.
Yeah, that's a fair approach. But my point is they are driving the narrative in the public.
They are indeed. And it is. And see, what you've described though is the basic new set of tools that are within the powers that be and any corporation that cares to use them tool set. And it's come to the point where it's become lucrative enough that entire cadres of businesses have formed to provide these services. Exactly. And we see these services, they're kind of like the crisis actors in the powers that be false flags.
Right.
It had to come about that crisis actor companies had to exist because there was such a demand for them. And lo and behold, we see that there's companies that specialize in crisis actors, just like we see that there's companies that specialize in reputation management or online reputation management or online reputation correction or any of these other words that they use to describe themselves. And they are the bot, shill, and troll farms. Mm-hmm. And they're highly lucrative, and they're making all kinds of people millions of dollars. And to a certain extent, they're providing some level of employment to individuals. I don't really take them seriously. You know, it seems to me a huge waste of electricity. Mm-hmm. But because there's things you could probably do it if you cared about it. But there's a certain. Let me see if I can remember who it was. I don't know if it was Terence McKenna or Alan Watts or somebody like that, but basically said the ultimate power is in not giving a damn, right? If you just don't give a damn about any of this stuff.
No, I'm not bothered like that personally. I mean, for me, it's my attitude to it is tangoing with trolls is like a sport. It's like having fun and also exposing them because people are not aware that's what's going on, and I want to exploit them to make people aware that's going on, because if they can in our comment field recognize that, then they can start doing it other places too, and that helps them not give a damn, because then they want to get fear is a big tactic and groupthink, right? So if they think if you have 9 trolls and 2 honest people, the 9 trolls may make it seem like that's the majority. For example, this is just an example, right? But if you remove those, you will see that everybody who's left agree about something. I don't know.
Sure.
So there's different ways you can.
Sure. No, I understand, but it's a philosophy of life, though.
And people need to be aware this actually exists.
Okay, and see, so right there, I look at the language and I say, no, people don't need to be aware. Okay, only those individuals, and it has nothing. It's not critical of you. It's just that my approach as a Taoist or from Zen is that, you know, or yogi is basically that people will get what their karma has them get, no matter what I choose to say or think about it. And so I don't bother to say or choose to think about it at all, because it's basically their karma as to whether or not they find me or anybody's message.
But why do people bother to pay them to alter opinions and spew out opinions?
Okay, because humanity is divided into, whether by karma or for whatever reason, human minds can be easily divided into categories. Okay, this is an arbitrary thing we're placing in on human minds from the outside, but it works. You can operate within it and benefit from it. And that is that there's a great number of people that care about personality. A great number of people, maybe a third or 40% of all of the people on the planet care about personalities, and they're interested in gossip and what people are doing around them and so on. Mm-hmm. There's another chunk that's almost as large, so not 40%, but say 35% of the people that are concerned about events. Right? Yeah. And they're much more concerned about events and what's going on that way in news and so on than they are about the gossip about the personalities. And they actually care, though. These large groups of people within humanity care about. So the people that care about personalities don't want to see
royals and Hollywood.
Right. Yeah. But those same people that read People magazine and all of the sports magazines about the celebrities and the entertainment magazines about celebrities, they never want to see themselves in any position of negative So their worst fear is that they might find themselves in those magazines being discussed badly, right? Okay. And so the same thing is the other group of people that are concerned about the events never, ever, ever want to find themselves in any media within any of those events. Mm-hmm. So they're fascinated by the hurricanes, but they never want to be in one, so to speak, right? And so those are their worst fears. So they're easily manipulated by the powers that be because these are the things that they care about. Yeah. Then there's some smaller group that cares about ideas, the ideologues, okay? And then there's an even smaller infinitesimal group, I think about 2% of the population, that is concerned about exploring and understanding reality. And there's a big, there's a big difference.
Hang on, I have to inject a metaphor.
Sure.
So you have the largest group, they are interested in who saw the UFO. The next group is interested in, there was a UFO. The third group is interested in, what are these UFOs? And then, how should we say the fourth group is probably they want to fly in a UFO.
Yeah, but they're also concerned within that fourth group, the ones like myself that want to fly in the UFOs, yeah. Okay, is also our main thrust is, what do UFOs mean in reality? Mm-hmm. In our exploration of our common reality, what is the meaning of UFOs? So in that sense, and actually I have for years defined myself when people ask, what do you do? It's really great. Okay, I could go and do local traveling. I'm going with my wife to, like a medical appointment, and I'm sitting out in the waiting room and, with other people that are also stuck sitting out in the waiting room. And someone asks, well, what do you do? And I say, I'm a semi-autician. Okay, shuts them right up.
Oh, right.
never another question. Most people don't even want to know what it means. Okay, right. But a semi-autician is someone who looks for meaning in life.
Right.
And that's my official tax category too. And
really?
And
wow.
It's really that's what I do for a living. Is I search for meaning in life, and when I find some of it, I see if I can't sell it. And if it sells, I make a profit. If it doesn't, I go look for more meaning in life. But basically, so the small group here of us that is doing this, we are not mutable. We're not changeable by the thoughts of others about ourselves. But everybody else within those larger groups are, and thus all of the tools that you've just been describing work. Mm-hmm. Okay, and here's something else. So just as a diversion for all of your audience, there's this guy out there who's a mathematician by the name of Eric Weinstein. He's been on Joe Rogan. He has a podcast. It's called Portal. He's had like maybe 5 or 6 of these podcasts. I happened to watch number 4, and it was extremely. Now he's a mathematician. Most of your audience probably won't care to watch him because they're into the events or people. And this is really a guy who's discussing ideas, but this was a series of very important ideas. And the guy he was talking to is a mentor of his in the mathematician and physics and statistician world. And this guy had an incredible illuminating and enlightening perspective. And that is that preferences are mostly lies. So polls are meaningless. And basically the guy's premise here is that most people, when questioned about their preference, do you like this ice cream, or do you like that color, or that tractor, or that car, or that politician? When you're asked these questions, you will lie most often.
You know what? When I was a teenager, I worked as a pollster. I can confirm this. It's all about how you ask the question. There's so many factors that gives you the answer you want.
Correct. And see, here's the problem. So the polls themselves are now tools. They're now weaponized tools, especially in our country. You can't get in this debate unless you draw this much in that poll. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then they ask the question such that you never will draw that much in that poll. Mm-hmm. But in any event, though, this guy's premise was even more shocking to people like ourselves that are potentially advertisers, because this preference lying extends down to the smallest level of relationship within our system of objects. So you as a householder have a relationship with your washer and your dryer. And however you may think of it or not think about it, you nonetheless have this relationship because you have them and you use them. But you may have feelings about them, but the curious part of this is when you are actually in a position to express the preferences that you've built up about these, even in the absence of questions. When it's simply a choice parameters, where there's no one asking any question, but there's a definitive opportunity to express a preference, you will lie about it, including to yourself. And it's staggering relative to how advertisers should be approaching the selling of their products, and how you can take advantage of this particular aspect of human nature that until we actually had computers and were able to apply these levels of algorithmic analysis, we didn't determine. And now we have the censorship algos trying to force us to not look at things and thus change our inbuilt preferences by force from the outside through all different kinds of shadow banning, actual banning, delay banning, and all these other tools. And so they're basically training humans. But what are they actually training us to do? Because they're training us to be smarter in our use about language. They're making us more carefully articulate.
You mean inadvertently? Because certainly not.
Inadvertently, correct. They're not trying to. They're not trying to. The censorship, though, means that people are now actually having to become linguists if you're going to be a YouTuber, because you've got to understand what your words are going to, what effect they're going to have on those algos. And so ultimately, you'll turn it the other way and say, what words could I use that would be favorable to use with these algos?
You know what? I have to say, I'm in that situation because we have so many videos demonetized. So I made it a sport out of finding out. Because what happens is the algorithm first does the dirty work. It flags something, right? And then some poor sucker has to listen through or watch through whatever it flagged. So now I'm trying to find out how can I communicate the same contents without touching, because I'm monitoring which words puts off the alarm. Or which pictures. So it's I have to get the contents out. The message without triggering the mainstream word that would be used. For example, let's say secret space program. I'm not saying it is, but let's say that was flagged. Then maybe classified space program would get through. You see what I mean?
Sure. Or hidden funding or occulted funding or whatever, right? Off-world exploration instead of space, et cetera, et cetera. But what does this do? This actually expands the pathways in your mind as well as in the mind of your audience, because now we all have to make that internal connection that your language has changed to reflect what's going on. Now, this is exactly analogous to another situation, okay?
UAP versus UFO?
No. Well, yeah, but I'm talking about a deeper social situation here that most people won't reference. And it's Cockney rhyming slang.
Don't know even what that is.
Okay, so in Britain, because England has always been a case of the royals ruling over everybody and the royals owning 97% of the land, the population was forced to do everything they could as serfs and subjects and slaves to get by. And one of the things they discovered was you are forbidden from saying nasty things about your betters.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and so you would use euphemism for those people that you wanted to insult. And so you would call them your betters as opposed to the royals, because your betters was an ambiguous term for somebody, whereas the royals was more specific. So you would alter your language. And it got to the point where the royals caught on. And so they knew certain words were, in fact,
derogatory against them,
mapped from other words. And so they got really pissed about it. So you couldn't use that anymore. So the Cockney, a particularly put upon group within the British population at the time, came up with and derived this thing they called rhyming slang. And so they were like rapping, street rappers constantly. And they were rhyming everything. And of course, in the rhyming of the past, you can discuss the horses and get on to the other thing and just leave the word hanging, and it gets across the message without ever saying the word.
This was in Cockney English?
In English, correct. And so Cockney rhyming slang went with the convicts down to Australia. And forms a core level of the occulted meaning of many Australian expressions and linguistic structures.
Hilarious.
And so look what's happening right now. The same kind of thing is being done by YouTube as was done by the royals in Britain through their power structure that forced the Cockneys to invent the rhyming slang just to get by. And here we are having to do basically the same thing just to get by with our daily activities within the system of objects that we're calling YouTube.
Very good point.
And so we're going to get better. We're going to get more linguistically precise. We're going to get more linguistically obscure and yet still be able to be communicative as we go forward here. And it's basically making those people that are not that are not themselves mental drones, but those people that are trying to do something in life and aware of themselves, it's going to make them better persons running up against these tools that the powers that be are using us within our digital world.
Right. Okay, we have to move on, Clif. Last question here. See, I have realized that my days are counted at YouTube eventually. Sooner or later they will shut us down. So we have emigrated to podcast platforms, and I actually think normal podcast platforms are not rigged. I think that's pretty organic and open. But then again, nobody's doing any building up for you. So that kind of compares like apples and oranges. So what I'm getting at, if you have any thoughts about a new tube.
Okay.
Because there is competition for it now, but the problem is that those who can afford it are usually... We live in corpocracy, right? So in order to be able to afford something like a YouTube, you would have to have a lot of power and money. And those who have that are not interested in an original YouTube, right? Because that was the problem with YouTube all along. But there are some who try, even though they're not exactly the same as YouTube, but you have Minds and BitChute and whatnot. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about... Like, will there be a refuge? Will we just ditch YouTube and go to another place? You think that will happen?
Sure. Oh, sure. YouTube will. No, we won't ditch it. YouTube will simply be superseded by emerging technology. And we've seen the example of that just the other day in Hong Kong. Okay. So YouTube will be replaced by a truly distributed network. YouTube exists now because people feel they need to go to a, quote, central place. But the real driver of that is that the volume of and cost of the data storage and the streaming is borne by YouTube, and therefore the advertisers go there. Therefore, it's a money-making operation. If YouTube had no advertisers and had no advertising, it would not exist because it costs too much to house all of those videos, right? 400 to 500 new videos per minute. Being uploaded. And so, but what will happen is just what we saw happen the other day. Okay, so software has always been racing the hardware. As hardware increases capacity, software is therefore able to do more. And as software does more, it drives down costs of hardware and increases the capacity. So it's a symbiotic, mutually uplifting relationship. And what will happen is that we will get to the point where there's no need for the underlying storage in YouTube. Because bear in mind here, I make a video. That video exists on my camera. I maybe move that video over to a PC to edit it. But even these days, maybe that video only ever exists on my phone and I do the editing on my phone. But that video, nonetheless, in its entirety, exists on my phone. And then I upload it to YouTube, and thereafter other people can download it or other people can view it. But it still is potentially in existence on my phone. And the only reason I'm using YouTube is because it has a URL, an HTML address that draws people to that. If everybody knew my video was there, everybody that wanted to watch it, they could potentially watch it on my phone. And my phone might be in a situation where it had enough bandwidth that it doesn't matter that there might be 500 people trying to watch a video that's on my phone. And it could potentially have the oomph, the electricity behind it to be able to serve and stream that much. And so the distributed network approach is really emerging. The other day
it's like peer-to-peer in a way.
Correct. It's called
versus
Mesh.
Google.
Right. It's called Mesh. Okay. So the other day we had an example of a Mesh network form up in Hong Kong. So the powers that be in Hong Kong turned off the cell towers.
Jeez.
In the areas that the protesters...
They had to go hardware to stop it.
No. Yeah, that's what their idea was, to go hardware to stop the protests. And what happened was that the population formed a mesh network where one cell phone communicated to all the cell phones that are around it through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And they didn't rely on the old data channel of the cell phone. Okay, so they weren't relying on what's known as the 802.3 channel, and which is the basic, the cell phone carrier. They went native and rogue, so to speak, and everybody just connected up on Bluetooth.
Yeah, you can do. There's a million people crossing each other all the time there, so that's effective.
And of course, and they're crammed in there,
yeah.
Right? They're crammed into Hong Kong.
Not where you are, Matt. That wouldn't work.
No, that wouldn't work. I mean, there's no squirrel around here for me to, and the coyotes just aren't interested in networking with me.
Maybe I should attach it to my cat, though. She gets around.
There you go. But in Hong Kong, of course, it works beautifully because of the density of the population. Yeah. Now, with the increase in the facility of what the phones are capable of, there's phones that are run just, guys walking around talking on their phone doing texting, and in the background, their phone is running as a basic DNS service and a search engine for the other mesh networks, so you can get connected to so-and-so.
People are so smart.
And all of this software is being... I'm sorry?
I was just saying, people are so smart. It's just an outburst of approval here, fighting back.
Correct. And all of these people they've been brought up in this digital world, whereas when I was born, let me see now. Actually, we can say that for the first the first 19 years of my life, I had no contact with anything that was digital. In that sense, right? I mean, I personally didn't have any interaction with an ATM or any of these kind of things. So the world I lived in wasn't digital in my formative years like these kids. And so because that's the nature, many of them have internalized it. And so they have as part of their language, the operating commands in whatever programming language that they normally program in, or all of the levels in a particular game and all of the programming language that's affected those levels, And in fact, it's gotten to the point where many of the gamers, the real smart guys in the game community, allow their games to be modified because they're going to be modified anyway. Yeah. And so many gamers are now programmers by default because they want to make the game do something it doesn't do at this point.
But there's no way the old apparatchiks over in Hong Kong can battle this because they are clueless.
Correct. They are actually living in another damn century and
another paradigm.
Correct. And so they're dying. And the only question is so there's many questions about how long the chaos is going to last, how far it will spread, how we're all going to interact with it and so on. But the ultimate question is basically for the power structures is how shall they decide to fade away? Because the fading away is indeed happening now. And, just like we were talking about the Epoch Times, this is a new emergence of a fringe group that has decided to get out there and slug it out and try and carve out a new part of the reality for themselves in the digital matrix. And they are able, as an oppressed minority within China, but outside of China, to stand up and literally go toe-to-toe, basically, with the Chinese central power structure. And here you have that same thing occurring at the same time. And China, by the way, the largest country on the planet, the longest dominant economic operating system on the planet.
Fastest growing economy.
Et cetera, everything. And their power structure is basically being held hostage by 5 dozen bright minds in Hong Kong.
Right.
Correct. And they're very much afraid of those 60 bright individuals.
Yeah. No, they turn to brute force, as do the power elite in the West, by the way, still. But I'm thinking then, taking away what you're saying from this, that the new tube isn't here yet. We're not seeing it yet.
Correct. But it's on its way, and it's inevitable. So I don't worry about it. Yes, it's going to affect those people that are trying to make a marginal living off of YouTube now. But of course, that's also, if they're smart, it's forcing them to look to other alternatives, to explore other things.
That's why I'm asking you. I want to jump ship before it's too late. And I haven't been able to decide which of the current so-called alternatives to go to. Because one of the things I dislike with those who are trying to set up an alternative is the sectarianism. One of the keys to YouTube success was that not only could you directly, peer-to-peer, face-to-face, YouTube yourself, but also anyone and everyone. Yeah. What happens with many of these competitors is that, we're going to just have one for conspi, we're going to just have one for alt-right, we're going to have just one for this, gaming, whatever.
Sure.
They are sectarianizing themselves, and that's never a clue to break through.
Okay, well, here's the thing, though. As an individual awake to being within the system of objects, you don't become attached to any decision about any of the objects. You become attached to the decisions about your goals. So why make the decision about which one to put your stuff on? Put it on all of them. And instead of looking for an individual platform solution, look for a software solution that facilitates you using multiple platforms with the one single. So you push one button and it automatically uploads all of your short snippets to Twitter, Facebook, Minds, BitChute, and all of these others.
And that kind of software exists today?
Oh, yeah. If you wanted to really manage a Twitter environment and you're not using third-party software, you're a fool. You can get
then I am a fool.
Okay.
But the reason I'm not doing the first thing you said is that it takes so much damn energy and time to, let's say I choose
learning curve, exactly.
No, but it's like I use BitChute, okay? So I spent a lot of time and I get nothing back for it because there's almost no views and there's certainly no money. Then I spend the same time on Minds, and you could go down the list, right? I can't. Then it's better to just sit on YouTube and wait for something better to come along. You see what I mean?
Okay, no, sure. I buy that. That's an effective strategy because there is no economic return directly from BitChute or Minds. Not
or views, if it at least were views.
Okay, but not in any meaningful fashion. Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, and so they're personally, if I were going to do that, you have to look at what the trends are. Okay, so the trend is your friend. Examine reality, and so maybe your reality says if I'm going to be able to survive with long content or long form content, then I must master short form content just to provide the economics. And so maybe I'm going to get really good at slicing out 1 minute memes out of my long form content, and I'm going to dominate Instagram and Telegram and all of these other short form content media sites. All right, where I can make bazillions of dollars because I know this because there's that woman over there that shows her ass twice a day and is making $5 million.
Instagram is really woman. It's like YouTube for men, Instagram for women. But I didn't understand you could make money on Instagram. Is that advertisement? What is it? How do you make money?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's dozens of different ways of making money on Instagram, just as there's dozens of different ways of making money on Telegram. Okay, and in fact, they're probably inventing...
And WhatsApp, and they're starting to use these chat tools now, I've noticed. Like WhatsApp and Telegram. These aren't really social media as much as they are like Skype, advanced Skype.
Multiple connection media, right? Multiple connection point media. Okay, and so imagine that. Okay, ultimately, distribution. Ultimately, if you recognize that humans are individually, we're trapped within a system of objects, and collectively, all of the humans are all individually and isolated, and our primary motivation each and every day, every single minute, is to communicate with other humans. Then it no longer matters if you think about, then it's helpful to think about WhatsApp and all of these kind of things, and even Facebook and all of these others as simply a means of communicating. So this is why WhatsApp, Instagram, and all of these other things are becoming very effective, is because they allow you as an individual to communicate to more people in a time than you used to be able to get online. So let's look at this really crudely, real quickly. When you first got online and you were a kid or whatever, you get on there and you screw up your courage and you make a comment on somebody's video. Okay, that's the first time you do it, right? And nothing happens, or you get shit for it, or you get praise for it. It doesn't matter. But there is an instant reward for you the next time you go back to that video, and you will go back to that video just to see your comment there and see your name. And that causes this little dopamine flare up in your brain, right? Okay, you actually feel good from seeing your name in print. All right. And so you get a dopamine response.
Well, not me. I'm the worst example. But yes, this is valid for everyone.
Yes. Right. Okay. So for most people.
Yeah.
And so they get a dopamine response, and that's what keeps them on that social media. And they become addicted to do this. And ultimately, some of them will go on to become YouTube personalities or write a lot of shit on Twitter or whatever, just to keep that response going. And this is what the social media count on in doing that.
Right.
But the new social media have taken it one step further, because you're getting the dopamine response from other people seeing your name and acknowledging that they saw your name via the comments. That was the evolution from the static comments under YouTube to chat.
Right.
And now on YouTube, the smart way to do it is to premiere your YouTube video. You make your YouTube video ahead of time. You don't live stream it. This is in competition with live stream, and it's actually catching on more.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And you don't live stream it, you premiere it, which means you set a time that it's going to be officially available on YouTube, and then you go join that chat while everybody is watching your video and chatting amongst themselves. You also participate in that chat.
No, I didn't think about that, because I considered doing this premiere thing, but then we're always behind. So when I'm uploading something, it takes fucking 12 hours to upload it, and then I'm thinking, no, let's get it out there. I can't wait anymore, right?
Sure, you're sick of it. Right, I understand that.
No, but what you're saying is brilliant, because we don't do live, not yet at least. And so I have to rely on being guests at other people's show to interact live.
There you go.
But I could do it like what you're saying now. This is brilliant. I didn't think of that.
Okay, and see, that's why the people at YouTube, not the powers that be, but the guys that actually design YouTube services and so on, the techies like myself, what they call the UX guys, the user experience guys, have noticed that this was the trend, and they can get more dopamine out of you and pump more into you if this interaction goes on, and people, they call it touching the hem, okay? And so it's like people want to touch the hem of the celebrity, and so they do it with this interaction with them in the chat. And so Premiere was done so that you, as the celebrity, as the creator, the producer of it, don't have to be involved in actually streaming, and thus not be able to interact well with live chat. So it's the best of worlds.
Everybody gets paid. The celebrity gets their ego massaged, and the fans get theirs massaged for this interaction. Perfect love.
And they keep you on there longer, and this was a boon to YouTube, because guess what? People actually stay in the chat longer than the video exists.
Right.
And so they've got all those.
And they even come before the video comes. They come to the
so
chat.
It's just, I mean, it's I look at these things and I think, oh my God, brilliant. I hope that whoever came up with that idea got a promotion out of it at least, right?
Of course not. Somebody ripped it off and he got booted. That's usually how it goes.
Probably. But nonetheless. So, but see, I'm admiring of it in a social technical fashion.
Sure.
Right. There's just a good evolution.
No, even me, who are non-technical, must admire this brilliant scheme.
Right. And so this is the beauty of those third-party software things for Twitter. You can get many number of them, third-party software that allow you to manage your interaction with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers, to give them the chat kind of experience, because you're responding through these automated bots that you set up with templates in advance in a quasi-personal fashion to many of the people that are on the following trail.
Yeah, I see Joseph Farrell, when he uploads something, I've noticed he's not personally on Twitter, I think, not often, but I see that it goes automatically to Twitter and then other places too.
Sure. You can automate all of this, guys. So I don't as a rule.
But maybe I'm too old school, because I've been thinking paranoia. I don't want to connect one account to another account, to a third account, to a fourth account. That's a gift to NSA and who not, right?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore, though, Guy. They've got that information already. And so really, truly, okay, so
Despite all my pseudonyms and VPNs and...
Right, but there's another aspect of this. You'll see people say, well, if you don't have anything to hide, why do you care if they take your information?
No, that's a bullshit argument.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's another way of looking at that. If I have something to hide, I want them to take as much information from me as possible so that I can bury what I'm trying to hide in the minutia of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the smart techies do, right? Mm-hmm. So I ran into this guy once, and I was discussing things with him in a general sense, and this is a professional, lives by his wits hacker who's like maybe in his 30s or 40s. Okay, we might think of him as like a con artist, only he doesn't steal from individuals, he steals from computers by knowing how computers work and software and this kind of thing. And one of the things that he said about that was that, data swamping is your friend. That the way to really keep yourself free, so to speak, is to let them have everything possible so that because basically the software will never get an accurate idea of really what you're doing if it understands or if you upload every possible thing. And in the process of uploading every possible thing, especially if you're technically astute, it's possible for you to flood the system. But this guy as a hacker was saying that in his profession, and I don't know if he was trained by the CIA or any of that. I suspect he was trained by somebody in an organization, and he's not with them anymore. And he's just paid to do things for individuals or does things on his own. And he had this guy come to him and wanted to be scrubbed out, wanted to be erased. And I don't know any of the details much beyond that, but the fellow I was talking to said, no, he said, I'll take your money. I think he charged him like 10 grand to do the job to protect this individual. And he said, yeah, I'll take your money. But he didn't erase him. He just put this guy into so many of the databases.
Right.
And under
hidden
so
in
much,
plain sight, old principle.
Correct. And had it tied to so many different networks and stuff that there was no meaningful information in there.
Brilliant.
So I like being tied over to the blue chicken.
That's so Tai Chi.
Exactly.
That move is so Tai Chi. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, we need to wrap up here pretty quick. So
okay. Like usual, I'm going to send you, but beware, I'm going to send you the death show soon.
Sure.
So if you could put it up on Twitter when that happens.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No worries, dude. No worries.
Cool.
Yeah, always do that for you, just
great.
anytime.
Thank you a lot. Nothing more to add here.
All right.
Or do you have anything more to add?
Nope, got to go eat.
Yeah.
So I got to go.
And I have to do a lot of things too. It's late here, but thanks a lot and you know what? Let's send your wife our blessings, our best thoughts of healing. Really hope she's going to get better.
Yeah.
You've had enough loss for a while
for
now.
For a long time.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes.
It would be nice to have someone remaining.
It'd be nice for a change. Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
for a change. So we call it a wrap?
Yeah, we can head out, sure.
Okay. God bless, Clif. Thank you a lot for this deep session.
Sure, no worries, guy. Glad we only do it a couple of times a year.
Same here.
Okay, yeah.
Well, thank you. I'll let you go.
Okay,
Yep.
bye.
Bye. And that's our show for today. Thanks again to Clif for being a good sport and coming on, sharing with us some of his insight into this digital world of ours. And thank you for listening. Now, before parting, I want to say to you people who re-upload our shows on these new channels that you're doing us no favors. I mean, most of those who do this are either bot services. We've struggled with that. And I didn't ask Clif about this in the show, but there are some weird channels that don't seem to be run by human beings, and they upload all sorts of weird stuff that's not consistent with each other. And I'm guessing it's a way to test to see if the stuff will be allowed to remain there without being taken down, for example, by copyright complaints. And if it's like a way to test to see, then after a while they can upload all the videos of a channel whose samples wasn't taken down. Otherwise, it can also just be random, that they just randomly lift videos from different channels without having an agenda to upload everything. And usually comments are disabled or there's no contact information. So that's one phenomenon. That's like the bot thing. And it's very hard to battle it because it doesn't seem, if it's a person, YouTube takes action. But for some reason they rarely touch these bot channels. So it's very hard to get them down. Sometimes, eventually, if we are consistent, we get them to take the vids down. But they don't delete the channels. It's almost as if these bot channels have some kind of special permission from the platform. But when there's persons and they pirate upload I think it's 3 copyright strikes, then they close down the channel. So normal people have to watch out for that. But I'm obviously trying to appeal to the normal people. If you're probably a fan of ours, if you're uploading our shows, either it's YouTube or BitChute or Mind or Gab or whatever all these platforms are called. I'm assuming you are. I mean, you may not be, but you just want to milk the attention that our videos can get. But in either case, you're doing us no favor because you are derailing views from our main videos. And in today's world, in today's digital world, views are counted as money, basically. I don't care about losing advertisement or even potential subscriptions by that. What I do care about is the view count, because the larger view count we have, the easier it is for us to stand up for ourselves when they try to crack us down. The more view counts we have, the easier it is to get guests on. You have no idea how many guests have checked out our view counts and then declined, and I promise you it would have been great shows. And you can't really blame them because they're snobs, but look, some people get 1 million requests and they really just have to rationalize who and where they can go on. I'm sure some of them, if they knew us, would come on just because it's a different format, because they know the audience is bright, because for once they can do in-depth. But, nobody is having a pulse of what's going on. People don't have time. Even most listeners are not aware of us. So how can you expect the guests? So that's an argument. Another is that more views gives us more facilities in the platform itself. More views also lead to, indirectly, to more advertisement and subscribers to our website, because obviously the more people who know about us, the more people know about us. It's like a synergy effect. If 10 people know about us, they will tell 10 others. If 100 people knows about us, they will tell 100 others, and so on. And also, it's such a hassle to battle these rip-offs of a hard work. We strive to produce original content for you, and it's so easy for these people who don't produce anything original to just take other people's work and build themselves up by that. It's a whole business out there to do it. And if you're doing it in a fair and legal way where you have agreements with those, no problem. But the problem is I try to assign helpers to battle these copyright things because it was so time consuming and energy draining, and it really adds to the slowness of our release. But it turned out it's not possible for our team members to do it because they have to do it through our main account. Oh, and a shout out to you, Selvi. So this means, people, that every time, you have no idea how big the process is. First we have to, let's say we search for these things and we find 5. Then it's a matter of clicking through the complaint field of every single one. And then we have to copy the pirate URL. Then I have to find my original URL, copy that in. Then I have to file out the form. Then I have to argue. Have to give all sorts of information. The whole process just for one may take half an hour. Then you add 5 more, right? And if you're really big enough, if you have enough view counts, you can get these things automated. You can join that automated service, but we are Not anywhere near. That's for the big corporations and those few who make it in big numbers. So you see, it's just going to be a drain. And maybe that's the point. Slow down production. I mean, we know TB does it like that. They're cheating and rigging and exploiting every small bits and pieces here and there, and together it amounts to a huge wall. Instead of doing one effective single thing that's too apparent and revealing and dramatic. So better, like Clif say, they make small rigs here and there that applies to all in bulk. So we have to battle that, and that, people, is also why you would help us a lot out if you were to report to us when you suspect pirate uploads. I've had that happen before. Very appreciated. You can reach us through our website. If you are a subscriber of our website, obviously very easy, but at our website there is like a contact form. You can also just comment on our channel and see if one of our people sees it there. And mind you, by the way, when you email us, it's very rarely that I even look at emails. I don't know how the other people can handle that, other podcasters, other channels. I have 2 people helping me with mails, and even that's not sufficient. So obviously we're doing something wrong. We are not being effective. Even the whole membership procedure is very time consuming and manual and ridiculous. But in order to improve this thing, someone has to sit down and learn how to do it better. And we just don't have time for that because we're behind. We're behind on YouTube or public releases. We're behind on membership releases. So it's just an evil circle that's very hard to get out of. So you're easing our work if you report these things for us. Sometimes I've got reports where it was fair game. What they reported we knew about and it was okay. But nevertheless, I do value that you tried, because you never know. So better you report too many where some are either us or someone who's permitted to upload something of us than under-report and let them go under the radar. So battling these rip-offs will help our own work at the end of the day, now that I've explained a little of how things are connected together. Another lesson from today's show is that sharing shows helps a lot. It influences the algorithm more than anything else. I think he said also playlists, but sharing them across platforms, mentioning us where it's relevant is also helpful, because that, if you mention it enough times, people will start knowing, where I have heard this name before, for Borealis, so better check it out. So that's something you can do. And if you help us out like this, we can focus more on what we should be spending our time on, which is producing more shows, releasing more shows. That's, after all, why you're into it, right? So it's not to do us any personal favors, it's because you enjoy the format and you enjoy the contents and topics and so on. So then we give you back more of that. We scratch each other's back, so to speak. Oh, and speaking of subjects, I mentioned in the show I want to focus on this Ross guy. Ross Ulbricht, I don't know how you pronounce it in English. And I want to do more power critical shows like that next year. People like Assange, Snowden, Ross, Jeremy Hammond, and also this guy who suicided. Aaron Swartz. I mean, he can't be freed because he was suicided, but his case warrants a show. And we should probably also have similar shows for journalists who's been accidented or suicided, but that is further down the road. And another kind of topic we want to see if we can explore in the future, In fact, I do want to have a whole series like the one we have on the crisis of academia. We should have a similar, probably more important, about the failure of the corporate media. I don't think they're going to be very popular, but I think it's a duty to contribute to the noise protesting the injustice of the corporocracy, whether it be online or in real life. So there's a lot of stuff we want to do in the future when it comes to social reality. We do have other venues we're walking down, like the spiritual reality and history and relationship-based issues. So a lot to gape over, but eventually we'll get there with your help. Because at the end of the day, you are the driving force behind our show. It's only viable if you, or if enough of you, deem it so. Finally, let me part with this beautiful quote. Digital platforms are worthless without content. They're shiny sacks with bells and whistles. But without content, they're empty sacks. It is not about pixels versus print. It is not about how you're reading. It is about what you're reading, said Maureen Dowd. That's it for today. I've been your host, Al. Until our paths cross again, I remain yours sincerely. Be seeing you.
Who is number one?